thanks for hanging out with me. I am Ashley Carbonatto, and I get the privilege of sitting and chatting with you a little bit, not as an expert, but as a sister in the trenches on motherhood, which is this big, massive category. But today specifically, we're going to talk a little bit about motherhood and identity, and sort of what that looks like, what it looks like to be a mom and not lose your identity. And so sort of before we get started, feels only fair for me to share a little bit about myself and my story and why I get to be the one sitting and chatting with you in your living room. So get yourself comfortable, grab your LaCroix, mine's over there on my desk, your water, your coffee, whatever. We're gonna just have a little bit of girlfriend time. So, like I said, not an expert. I am here with you in the trenches, but I have walked the path of being a mom now for about a little over a decade. And there's some things that I've learned along the way, the hard way. Okay, so a little bit about me. I started my career as a corporate recruiter, and I loved it. I wore my high heels every day. I got really good at sprinting in them. It was kind of crazy how good I was at running in high heels. And I always thought that I would work. I always thought that I would be a career mom. I was raised by a working mom, a working dad. Both my parents always worked outside the home, and that was just what I thought I would do too when I became a mom. And then we started having babies, my husband and I, and what do you know? My heart changed. And suddenly there was this kind of seismic heart shift in me where I knew that my focus on my career needed to take a back seat to my family. And we kept adding babies to our family. It felt we were on this like rhythm there for a while where it was like every other year I was pregnant. So my body was like yo-yoing, like up, down, up, down, up, down. And with that came a lot of my hormones going up and down as well. And we have three kids. So, there was we had 3 kids within 4.5 years. And one day after having our 3rd baby, I woke up and I just didn't know who I was anymore. And, we sort of pivoted quickly. Like, we got married young. We got married at 22. We pursued our careers hard and fast. And then we were like, well, the next thing is have babies. And so then we had babies and we just started cranking them out. And I never really transitioned. We just kept doing the next thing in front of us. And one day I woke up and I just was waist deep in run-of-the-mill everyday mom life, and I was miserable. I just was miserable. Like, I just didn't know who I was anymore. Like, all of a sudden my everyday Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday looked nothing like what I envisioned. And not only did it look nothing like I envisioned, all of a sudden the things that I was doing exhausted me and drained me, and I just was so lost and dissatisfied, and it felt like I was just going upstream every day. Like, everything was so monotonous to me. Like, it was just this constant Groundhog's Day, and I didn't want to wish away these years with my babies, but I wanted to wish away these years with my babies. Like, I needed out of the spin cycle of the little years of motherhood because I was drowning. And because of that, I was struggling to make connections with my friends, and I didn't really we had this community that was good, but I didn't know who I was. Where did I fit in that community? I wasn't this domestic goddess who dreamed of being a stay-at-home mom. I thought I was going to be a career girl. And so I just didn't know where I fit. And it seemed as though all of the achievements and the accolades and the affirmation that my career had provided was suddenly gone. And I had this tiny army of children that we had created who yelled at me from sunup to sundown, and I felt like I was failing. I dropped all the balls. There were no more balls. We were no longer juggling. I was a hot mess. And so that sent me into depression. And I didn't have the language for that at first. I was experiencing anxiety. Never experienced anxiety before. Again, didn't have the language for that. I didn't know what anxiety was. I just knew I was irritable and I was sad, and I could, cry or yell at the drop of a dime, and I didn't recognize myself. I was the worst version of myself, and I couldn't see a way out. But there was something in me that knew I couldn't escape, right? Like, I could end up on Dateline, I could escape. Or there had to be a way to marry who I was and the job that I was doing without having to change my circumstances. I knew somewhere deep inside of me, amidst the depression and the anxiety and the craving for more, the craving to escape, I knew that what I was doing had to mean something, but I didn't believe it. And so that's what I was missing. I couldn't connect those dots. I couldn't connect the job of being a mom with any sort of purpose. And I just didn't know how, I just didn't know how to be, honestly, without the affirmation, without the accolades and the achievements from outside of the home. And so I went on a journey. I went on a journey to find me again. And so, I have sort of condensed these last 10 years into 3 lovely little bullet points for you to take away, because there are sort of, some principles that I began to uncover that I wish I would have known before. I wish I didn't have to spend so many years swimming upstream and crying and wishing to escape. And so that's what I am here to share for you. And so if you allow me to dig in a little bit, hopefully sharing sort of these principles with you can help you reconnect and rediscover your identity and who you are without having to ditch your family or having to change your circumstances. And so I love that Emily is talking with us about the I am statements that are in the Gospel of John, because to be frank, I think as a mom, I lived under a lot of incorrect and false I am statements for a lot of years. And so let's dig in. Okay, so the first thing that I learned and sort of, kind of down this journey, down this path, was learning to face head on the concept that I am not my work. I am a child of God. And so I'm an Enneagram 3. We should get that out on the table. If you're familiar with the Enneagram, you know that the Enneagram 3 is known as the achiever. And thus, I was craving and deriving a lot of my worth and a lot of my value from these achievements, but I didn't know it. I didn't have the language for that. And frankly, culture really celebrates achievement and accomplishment. We're constantly pushing to do more. And motherhood doesn't really allow for that. A lot of what we're doing as moms every day doesn't get any praise. And so I had to sort of start peeling back the layers of who I am. And my first takeaway was coming to terms with that. I I'm a child of God. Not a mom, not a wife, not a daughter, not a sister, not a corporate whatever. First and foremost, I am a child of God. And I began to ask myself, who was I created to be? How was I naturally gifted? Because like I said, I was really good in the workplace. But then throw me inside these cute white shiplapped walls with this tiny army who just yelled at me and demanded chicken nuggets and mac and cheese all day long. And I didn't feel like I was good at it. And I had to really focus on who I was before motherhood. And asking yourself those questions. Who was I before motherhood? Who was that little girl who had big, audacious dreams? You know, maybe you are someone that dreamed of being a mom, and now that you're here, it's different than what you thought it was. And maybe you feel like it's not cracked up to what you thought it would be. It doesn't feel like enough. And that word enough, I'm constantly in attention with it of not enoughness. And our culture really celebrates enough. Who is enough? What is enough? And it's enough to be a child of God. And so, you know, one of the other questions that I had to ask was, who was I before I started to feel overwhelmed with being a mom? Like, I remember when I had my first baby and I transitioned out of the workplace, and I thought it was great. All of a sudden I had all this freedom, and I had this cute little baby, and I would, you know, have these like buff arms because I was carrying that like whatever car seat thing all over the place, and I could watch Regis and Kelly in the morning. And sure, I had to reheat my coffee a couple of times because he'd skip a nap here and there, but you know, then we'd go to library time, and I felt like I was a mom, but kind of this lady of leisure. Like, you know, he slept through the night super early, and I loved it, except when I didn't. And then when we added the other babies, all of a sudden I was just running the race. And sorry, I lost my place here. I was running the race, and I was super overwhelmed. And so I had to sort of dig into what were some of the earliest beliefs about myself that I could remember before the world told me and taught me how I was supposed to be as a mom. Like, who was I? Who was I? Like, this concept of being a child of God and being the one that just gets to be loved. You know, it's hard to remember that when you're a mom. You have these little people that need from you all of the time. And when you don't start with your identity as a child of God first, when you aren't going to your Heavenly Father and getting filled up, going to Him for all of our needs, the same way that our kids come to us for all of their needs, you start to just question, like, well, what about me? Who's going to care for me? Who gets to take care of me? God does. God does. The world doesn't get to tell you how to be. You are a child of God, and that is the basic level of foundation that we have to start with as moms, because you're going to pour out into these people for the next 18 years. And I'm 10 years in, and I'm good at math. Hold on. I have 13 more years to go. Oh, I forgot to tell you how old my kids were. They are 5, 8, and 10. Right? Yeah, they're 5, 8, and 10. And so I have 13 more years to go before even the youngest is out of the house. And, you know, I'm not an empty nester, but we have several empty nesters in our life. And people tell me that it actually goes beyond that. So, you know, take that for what it is. But starting with the core truth that you are not your work. I am not my work. I am a child of God is the foundation that we need to begin to rebuild our identity and work from this place of abundance rather than scarcity. We're not, when you're drained at the end of the day because you've just poured out to these little people, the only way to be filled back up is to remember I am a child of God. Okay. Principle numero dos. I was made on purpose for a purpose. Okay. So I had to go back to scripture and really begin to dig in, right? I'm a child of God. We got that. Okay, check. But I didn't fit the mold. I didn't think that being a college educated female who had a successful career, this is what we work toward our whole life. I am a woman of the 21st century, technically a millennial. And now I was staying at home. Like, it felt so less than. And that's terrible because I wouldn't think that about you, like in your life choices. If you chose to stay home, you chose to put your career on pause or give it up, frankly, doesn't matter. I wouldn't think anything less of you. But for whatever reason, I didn't believe that for myself. I thought I was less than. I felt subservient. I felt dumb. I felt dumb for changing my mind that I was, planned to be this career girl and I wasn't. And so I had to figure out and believe that I was made on purpose for a purpose. And thankfully, Jesus really reminded me of that, because all throughout the Gospels and his formal ministry, he saw women and he valued women. And that's the type of message that I needed to receive. So it didn't ever matter what their title was or what they were doing. Frankly, women weren't really allowed to be working in biblical times. A lot of them were demeaned and put to the side. But Jesus valued women. And so if Jesus valued those women, regardless of what they were doing for their 9 to 5, then the same must be true for me. And so instead of worrying about what I wasn't or how purposeless I felt, I started to make a list of what I wasn't good at and what I was good at. Or maybe a better way to say that was what I wasn't and who I was. So, I like went deep. I went we're peeling back the layers, right? Because we're trying to root and rediscover our identity here. And I think that this sounds really basic, but it is so practical. And so making a list of things that you're good at and things that you aren't, ways that you were created and ways that you weren't. So for me, I had to come to terms with the fact that I did not fit the stereotype for a stay-at-home mom. What did that look like? That meant this is not past tense, this is current tense. I am terrible in the kitchen. I am literally the farthest thing from Betty Crocker or Martha Stewart. I grew up on boxed Velveeta, shells and cheese, and Hamburger Helper. And that's about the extent of my cooking skills. Yet that's not who I was in my day-to-day. I was expected to make the meals, and I was making homemade baby food, and my husband would go off to work and then he would come home, and I had this vision of having this warm, peaceful environment to walk into that was like clean and hot meal on the table. And I mean, good Lord, bless Blake for staying with me all these years, because he'd walk in and we were a train wreck. And it was because I was, like I said earlier, like what it felt like swimming upstream, because I was trying to do all the things that I wasn't good at. I wasn't naturally gifted in. And then I was putting myself down for it. I was feeling like this failure of like, I knew I was supposed to have these kids. I knew I wanted to be a mom. I didn't think it would look like this. Why do I suck so bad at this? And so, I kept going down the list. I'm like, I hate being a class parent. Like in the school, like going and doing class parties and chaperoning the field trips, I want to poke my eyes out. Same goes for busy toddler. If you're a fan of busy toddler, that is awesome. You were created on purpose for a purpose. I was not. Sensory bins and art projects and mess and chaos and all of that, I literally just like poke my eyes out. I don't really like working out, but I really love the sauna. I love to host, but I hate to cook. I prefer creamy over crunchy peanut butter. I think it's important to really just peel back every single layer, lay out everything, who you are and who you aren't. Because if you believe for yourself that you were created on purpose for a purpose, whatever's on the aren't list doesn't matter. What's important is circling who you are, circling that list. Because all of these things, down to your preferences and your natural giftings, they were for a reason. And not just for a reason, they were gifted to you. God created you to be the way that you are for your specific kids. I'm hoping, I'm believing that God created my kids and chose me to be their mom because of the gifts that I have, not what I don't have. I pray regularly for God to fill in the gaps, because who I am, yes, is on purpose, but I am not all things. I am not going to be able to meet all the needs of my kids, nor am I meant to. So God needs to fill in the gaps, but who he created you to be, all the little nuances, all of the things, like I knew that I was a leader. I knew that was a gifting of mine. I realized in this self-discovery process that I'd been the captain of every single one of my sports teams. JV, mostly, freshman team. I was only on varsity for 1 or 2 years, but I knew these things about me, and they're all important. They're all important in rooting your identity. We're now building upon, I'm a child of God, and now I'm created on purpose for a purpose, sorry. I had to come to terms with the fact that I wasn't submissive. I wasn't passive in this stereotypical docile stay-at-home mom way. I thought that's what I was supposed to be. I thought that I would transform. I thought that I would push out this baby and all of a sudden I would be a new me, like introducing Martha Stewart. Except, no, that didn't happen. And so I had to really like come to the end of myself. And really more than that, I had to come to the end of my ego. Because I wanted to be good and I just didn't feel like I was doing a good job. And I think once you realize and accept and believe that you were never meant to fit the mold. There is no mold. There's no gender stereotype or Christian stereotype or traditional gender role that you have to fit. You fit where God created you to fit. It was on purpose, for a purpose. And so I have this funny story to tell you. Okay, so when I finally accepted this truth about myself, like, okay, God, you made me to be a little bit sassy and terrible in the kitchen. Maybe that's more nurture versus nature, whatever. Doesn't matter. I started to feel free. I started to kind of, I was beginning to come back to me and kind of the confident and tenacious Ashley that I once was in the workplace. I was coming back to her, and I hadn't abandoned my family yet. We weren't on date-line, and my kids started to see this Ashley reemerge, this new mom coming out. And so my oldest was in kindergarten, maybe it was first grade, whatever. And I got an email home one day telling each parent that they needed to make homemade frosting because the whole class was going to be making gingerbread houses. And my blessed oldest raised his hand and said, "Can my mom just buy frosting?" Which I was like, praise the Lord, I have done something right. He knows I'm not making no frosting in the kitchen. Like I am a store-bought mom through and through. I am party in a box, not a Pinterest mom. This is how we roll around these parts in the Carbonatto household. And his teacher said, no, it had to be homemade. And so he came home and he was like, Mom, I've got really bad news. I have to have this frosting tomorrow at school. And you have to make it. I already asked, you have to make it. I'm like, mother of pearl. It's Christmas season. We are the executive producers of all the things holiday. So sure, why not? Let's just make homemade frosting. Fine. And so I pull up the email and I'm looking through the ingredients, like, okay, put my Martha hat on. Here we go. And I don't, like, one of the ingredients, I'm going to tell you what it is for the sake of like just being honest. And so you can laugh and be like, oh gosh, she's really bad in the kitchen. Or maybe if you're like me, you'll feel a little bit validated. But one of the ingredients was cream of tartar. Not cream of tartar, I learned. Cream of tartar. Have flour and sugar in my kitchen, okay? You think I have some obscure ingredient like cream of tartar? No. And so I'm all stressed out, and this is my oldest kid. We're new to the public school system, and I just start like reeling in my head with those same thoughts of self-doubt of like, see, I knew you weren't good enough. You're a terrible mom for not having these ingredients. Like I'm sure Jack's mom, she probably has made a double batch of homemade frosting by now. And here I am, and I'm like, I don't even know what the heck cream of tartar is. Like what section in the store is that even in? What do you use cream of tartar for? Oh, Lord. It's a silly, ridiculous story, but like, it was this constant narrative and this story that I was telling myself that I wasn't a good mom because I just didn't possess the same skills as what I thought a mom should do. And so whatever, I ultimately ended up SOSing one of my neighbors who is very domestic. So when you figure out what you are and what you aren't, you need to, pro tip, fill your life with other people who are the things that you aren't, because that is what is going to make a good mom and frankly, a good leader, whatever, all the things, is when you surround yourself with people whose strengths are your weaknesses. So weaknesses in the kitchen. I find my domestic moms. I'm like, you are my people. I need you. I love you. Thank you and good night. They made my homemade frosting. Yep, I outsourced it. I offered my kitchen. She made it in my kitchen, and I offered her a glass of wine. So, you know, there was a little bit of give and take. She didn't have to dirty her kitchen, and I supplemented with wine, and it ended up being a great night. But that story of like who you were meant to be is going to replay over and over. And so it's just constantly going back to on purpose for a purpose. Okay. Last and final. How long have I talked to you? Nobody knows. Didn't set a timer. Rookie move. Okay. The last principle that I want to share is I am significant and worthy right where I'm at. I'll say it again, because this is an important I am. I am significant and worthy right where I'm at. Tell me glamorous parts of being a mom. Tell me how significant you feel when you're getting up in the middle of the night for the 4th night in a row to nurse your baby, or to give Tylenol because they've had a fever. Tell me when you go out to a dinner party and somebody asks you what you do. Tell me how significant you feel, or if you regularly use the word just when you describe yourself. I'm just a mom. I just stay at home. I just take care of my kids. I just, like, am their counselor and their chauffeur and their chef and their nurse and all the things. This job that you're doing is significant. And worth is kind of that last piece of identity that really solidified the foundation of being able to like re-engage with who I was. Because worth is constant. It's a constant. God assigned us worth and value right out of the womb. It's not something that we earn or something that we get or achieve or accomplish. It just is. We're worthy. He is worthy. And look, I get it. Okay? We live in social media times. Every stoplight, every 2-minute bathroom break you get, we're pulling out our phones and we are checking the highlight reel of everyone else. And oftentimes, when the best thing that we've got going for our day is that our littlest hasn't peed yet on the floor, or the Bachelor's on tonight, you can be left feeling really down about your job and your role as a mom. Feeling like maybe you should be doing more. That's how I felt for so long. I felt like I'd get on social media and I needed to do more. Like taking care of humans, like growing humans, and then like being solely responsible for their survival 100% wasn't enough, which is such a stupid lie. Like, I mean, people get paid to be caretakers. Like that's an actual job. Both for kids and just humans in general. Like that's a career. That's a thing that people pay for. And so the fact that I wasn't getting paid, I was allowing the fact that there was no paycheck coming in to speak into my significance and my worth, because I was a mom. And it's enough to be a mom right where you're at. Jesus demonstrates throughout the Gospels that he is far more interested in our character than our achievement or our title or what we're doing. He cares about our heart. And so if he cares about our heart, then maybe I don't need to put myself down for the job that I'm doing. Or maybe I don't need to feel less than for the job that I'm doing. Maybe he's put me right here caring for these little kids for a reason and for a purpose. And frankly, for my story, I think it had way less to do with them being my little kids, my kids. I think it had more to do with me. If I continued down the path of my career and I was constantly filled with the affirmation that, my success was giving me, I wouldn't have ever connected the dots that I'm a child of God. I wouldn't have been refined to come to the end of my ego to be like, God, okay, you are worthy of my life. And what you've given me today is these kids right in front of me. I think so often we're like searching and searching and searching for our purpose outside of what we're already doing when our purpose is right in front of us. Which for me, in this season, is my little people. Right? Like, that is significant. That is worth my time. That is worth my energy. And there doesn't have to be more outside of it. Because nothing that I pursue outside of these four walls, outside of motherhood, is going to fulfill me. That's not going to give me that contentment that I crave. It's not. And I felt like, okay, but maybe I'm not doing enough. Maybe it doesn't feel like, because you can't see it, right? Like, we can't see the fruit of what we're doing right now. And one day, I was in the middle of a Bible study, and this story was brought to mind in scriptures, and I should be a better speaker and know exactly, I believe it's in Matthew. Challenge, fact check me. But it's the story of when Jesus, it's in most of the Gospels, but this particular, when they were recounting this particular version, when Jesus feeds 5,000, he talks about how a little boy, so they have, backtrack. There's 5,000 people that have gathered, and they're hungry. And Jesus is with his people, he's with his disciples. And the people are starting to get a little bit antsy. I imagine hangers setting in, not that I know anything about that, but I imagine it's starting to set in, and his friends, his disciples are like, what should we do? And Jesus says, you need to feed them. And one of the dudes is like, I actually think they all need to go home and get their own food, which totally would have been me. Yes, I would have been like, so you guys need to we're gonna wrap this thing up. You guys need to go feed yourselves. I'm very compassionate like that. And Jesus is like, no, you need to feed them. And they're like, well, we don't have anything. And this little boy comes up, and he has 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. And maybe, I'm not a fisherman, I know that shocks you. Maybe it was a massive fish. Most likely not. Most likely it was a small, meager fish. And the little boy presents it. He's like, I got this. And they sort of look around and they're like, okay, like, that doesn't feel like enough to feed 5,000 people. But okay, thank you. And Jesus blesses, he prays over this food and says, okay, pass the baskets. I imagine they were in baskets, I don't really know. And as the story goes, everyone ate until they were full. And there were leftovers. And some would see this story and you know, it's a miracle, right? Like, it's a miracle that this tiny little amount of food could feed 5,000 people. That's a miracle. That's what they would see when they read this story. But what I felt like God showed me and highlighted to me in that moment was that little boy. And how he brought his the little bit that he had. This is all I got, God. What can you do with it? And he submitted that. And God used that tiny little bit, and he fed over 5,000 people, because women and children were there, the gospel says too, and they weren't counted back then. So there were more than 5,000 people there. And I resonate so deeply with that, because it feels like, as a mom, like, how can my contribution, how can raising just these 3 kids like amount to anything? Shouldn't I be doing great, grand, big things? Right? Like, that's what social media is telling me to do. And that's not our job. We get to show up every day, and it feels like a little. I know it feels like a little. It just feels like not enough. It feels like raising kids as a mom full time isn't enough. And I have got to believe in the truth of that story, and believe that is a testament to who Jesus is. That as long as we submit our part, so that's all we're asked to do. Nobody was asked to go fish and come back with massive nets full of food for everyone. No. The little boy, he just gave what he had. And God used it in big ways. Significantly. When I choose to believe and accept that I am loved wholly for who I am, not what I do, ugly parts and all of me, then I'm freed up finally to pour out to my kids, to my family, without needing them to say, good job. I don't need that affirmation from them, right? Because I'm a child of God. I am that little boy. I get to go to my Heavenly Father, and I get to say, this is what I got. What can you do with it today? Right? And that looks really basic. It looks really normal. It looks like preschool, drop off and pick up. It looks like your 500th load of laundry. It looks like all that. And he gets to be God, and he gets to assign the worth and the value and the significance of how it gets used. That's not our job. But he says, he shows us that's all he requires. We get to submit it to him. And so when we choose to let that kind of wasteful love in, like knowing I am a child of God, I was created on purpose for a purpose, and I am significant and worthy right where I'm at. When you really receive that and believe it for yourself, it frees you up to begin to let that same kind of wasteful, reckless love out, which is what is going to be required of you in motherhood. Like, these kids are going to keep showing up day in and day out like, mom, 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 every day. I recorded this 2 times. I had to stop recording 2 times because children, mom, right? When we choose to let that wasteful love in, it frees us up to let that reckless, wasteful love out, which is what is required. We just get to run the race that's marked out before us, and the path is going to turn. The path is going to look a lot different than what we thought it was, but you were created on purpose for a purpose. And so we got to trust that our purpose is right there in front of us. Whatever is in front of you. I think of daily manna, like whatever's right there in front of you. That's what you got for today. That's your purpose. Not some like stage to stand on or some follower milestone on Instagram. Like, oh, I really want swipe up. I really want swipe up. Like, whatever it is, like, it doesn't ultimately matter. And I am so preaching to myself right now. And I could cry. I'm not going to, but I could. Because it's so hard to believe as a mom. Why is that? Why is that? Why does the world not value motherhood? I don't know. I really don't know. That's probably a topic for another day and another time. But I do know that as women, we are valued by God. He doesn't view us the way the world does. He doesn't need us to have titles and this like awesome resume where someday we're going to like get to heaven and get to the pearly gates and we're going to show God our resume and be like, I did it. What do you think now? Do you love me? No, he meets us right where we're at. He gives us everything that we need right now. The gifts that you have, they're there for a reason. Unwrap them. Use them. Use them in your home and trust that that is just as worthy and significant as using them on a stage for more than the little people in front of you. This is how we move the human race forward. This is how we get to raise up the next generation. Tell me that that's not significant. No. Don't let the world tell you. They don't get to tell us anymore who we are. God tells us who we are. And you are worthy and significant and created in the image of God for a reason. The identity that we're all chasing has already been given to us by God. That's it. You are a daughter of the King. You are a child of God. We get to spend eternity in heaven, not because of anything that we do, but because He chose us. That's the place of abundance that we get to work from every day. Right? We get to be that little boy that comes to his father and says, "That's what I got." And He'll bless it. He will use it for His purposes. And we may not see it this side of heaven, frankly. Like, who knows? Gosh, oh no, I shouldn't talk about that. I think of legacy and I think of generations, and I have friends in my life who are third and fourth generation Christians, and they have grandparents and great grandparents who have loved the Lord and served in their own capacities. And I just think what a legacy that is. What a legacy to just be faithful to the kids that have been given to you and do it wholeheartedly, and don't allow any outside narrative to speak into your value and your worth. You are more than a mom. If it helps, say it out loud, right where you're at. I am more than a mom. You are. You are. Okay, as we close out, again, how many minutes was this? Nobody knows. I just want to speak a couple of quick affirmations over you. And then I want, I'll whatever. Okay. So I'm going to speak some truths and affirmations over you that are found in the gospel throughout Jesus's life. Because I think he's our biggest champion. And I'm so thankful that I stopped trying to earn his love, and still working on it at times. But anyway, whatever. Okay. You are not the summation of your paycheck or lack thereof. Doesn't determine your value or your worth, especially if you don't receive one or if it's less than your partner's. Your impact needs to be felt. The dreams that are in your heart are God-given, and they need to be explored. Your potential is worth cultivating. And your influence matters. And right now, your influence is as a mom. And truly, like, I have fought this for so long, but I really, really believe, especially for you, that moms run the world. Like, there is nothing more significant than what you're doing right now. We get to do this. And so I invite you to step into that. I hope that this has been helpful to you. I hope that my ultimate hope for you is that you would really align and connect with who God has made you to be, because that's the exact mom that we need, your kids need, your family needs, your sphere of influence needs. Those exact gifts, those exact wirings, those natural things of how you're wired. We need that. We don't need you to be anybody else. So anyway, for more info, I want to, in normal life, you would be responding and we'd be talking, and this would be a two-way conversation, but we're in COVID and nothing is normal. So ways to connect with me. I would love for you to connect with me. I am usually mostly on Instagram in terms of the social platforms, and I'm at Ashley_Carbo. Also, you just got the Cliff Notes version, but this is my book, More Than a Mom. And it is the full story. There are lots of other funny little tales in there that I shared that I didn't share with you today. But buy it, share it, give it to your friends, whatever, because I think that women will connect. I believe that God gave us this message, and I think it'll help you. I hope that it'll help you just realize that you're doing better than you think. That's really ultimately like the Cliff Notes. You're a mom and you're doing better than you think. So thanks for hanging out with me. I loved it. Come talk to me and share and whatever on Instagram, and we can hang and share a glass of wine and a cup of coffee and a LaCroix and a bottled water. All of it. We'll just drink it all at the same time. Thanks, friends.